I'm Dawn Montefusco, and this is Write from Your Heart, how to unleash your creativity, share your message, and leave a lasting legacy. And today we have a very special guest, Lisa Tenner. An authority on book writing and publishing and winner of the Silver Stevie Award for Coach Mentor of the Year, Lisa Tenner guides experts, entrepreneurs, and visionaries to joyfully write and publish their books. Lisa has been quoted in the New York Times, featured on ABC News, and more. Lisa Tenner serves on the faculty of Harvard Medical School's publishing and women's leadership courses and teaches award-winning book writing courses. Lisa Tenner's clients have received 5- and 6-figure book deals from a large variety of publishers, from Random House, St. Martin's Press, and HarperCollins to niche and university publishers. Her clients' books have been featured by Oprah, on NPR, The Today Show, Good Morning America, and all over the national media, including the New York Times, Cosmopolitan, Women's Health, Forbes, and much more. I love reading that, Lisa. Hi.
Hi, it's great to be here, and I love the theme of this. Writing from your heart.
Thank you so much. Well, tell us a little about what's going on with you. What projects are you working on?
Well, I'm in the midst of teaching a mastermind group right now, which is it's really fun. It's a smaller group than I usually teach, and so it's been really enjoyable. And we're also giving people a lot more time to work on their books. And my signature program, Bring Your Book to Life, which starts in February, the time frame is like, generally they have some time to really get clear on the book concept with me, but then each week after that they're writing a chapter. So it's really like ba-boom, ba-boom, ba-boom.
Yes.
And so this is like the slower paced, so it's kind of fun doing things at a different pace, and seeing how that works for people.
Oh, that's great.
Yeah. And then Bring Your Book to, sorry?
How long is the mastermind group?
That goes until January, and then in February, Bring Your Book to Life begins. But I'm already starting with some people who, often it's really nice to have a long period of time to really get clear on the book concept and the structure of the book, particularly with books that are more prescriptive. So I'm starting to work with people now who are then going to be in the February class where we go boom, boom, boom with the first
fun.
class. Yeah.
Oh, great. Congratulations. That sounds like an awesome time. When did you first become a book writing coach? Like, what happened?
It was kind of a goofy, like the universe gave me a little bit at a time, because I really wasn't sure where I was going. I had this idea for a book, and it was kind of a long 7-year process to go from this idea to co-writing is what it ended up with, but writing with 2 co-authors. And one of them being a cartoonist who brought cartoons to the book, and it's called The Ultimate Guide to Transforming Anger. Oh, cool. But I really didn't have a background in psychology, and I also didn't have a background. I took a lot of writing courses in college from a lot of luminaries. So I minored in writing, but I didn't have experience writing a book, for instance. And so it was this long drawn out process. And then when the book came out, I realized pretty early on, I don't actually like working with people's anger in workshops. So I was kind of in yoga class. It was like this download, like, okay, now you're going to teach people what you did to write your book. Yeah. And it started really not specifically with books, but with kind of getting in the zone for any creative project, painting, photography, writing. But quickly I learned my people are writers, because that's who came to me. And often it was started to be people who wanted help with a book proposal. So it's like one of these things that I followed my gut for one next step, and it just getting clearer and clearer.
Oh, I love that. Isn't that great when the universe just sort of like tells you what you're going to do?
It's awesome. It's really awesome, because I don't think I could have figured out such a rewarding and fun and creative career.
You do, I do want to point out that one of the things that really stood out for me before we even jumped on, I was reading through this, practicing, he says to joyfully write and publish their books. That's on purpose. You put that in there. Obviously, everything's on purpose. But tell me more about the joyfully. I gotta know, because that hit me like a ton of bricks. Like, oh, thank God, joyfully.
Yeah. So, before generally when I work with someone before writing the book, I have them write a vision statement. And the vision statement is certainly about what it's going to do for your readers and the world, but it's also about what it's going to do for you. And not just in the future, but what's it going to, like, what's the process going to be like?
Yeah.
And so I like people to be mindful of, like, do you want it to be easy? Because everybody thinks it's going to be really hard. And, you know, that's not, I mean, there is hard work, but you can also bring some ease into the
Yeah.
process too. And for some people it really is easy, but not all of us. But there can still be ease in the process, and certainly a lot of joy. It can be really fun and so rewarding. And I have these 5 steps for writing on the zone. And
I was just going to ask you that. Yeah. Yeah.
the final step is gratitude. And you could have that be the first step too. It doesn't really matter about the order. But I love ending in gratitude because it sets you up for the next time, right? So if we're like, oh, I only wrote 2 pages instead of 4, or, you know, I hardly wrote, I just sat here. You know, that doesn't set you up. But if you say, I'm so grateful I sat in this chair and then I got a paragraph out, you're setting yourself up for the next time, and you're trusting that that time in the chair was powerful, even if it, you know, seemed like I was contemplating my navel. Like I was really, you know, it's like the fallow field, right? Like maybe today was a fallow field. But that trust factor, I think, is so important. And I think that brings a lot of joy when we're, you know, I can get in that controlling mode. And I think it takes the joy out of the writing process, but it also takes the joy out of the product sometimes too.
Yes.
And so we can really be more open and free, then there's a lot of joy that comes.
I love it. What are the other 4? Give us the.
Okay. So the first is wipe your mind clear. And it's really about, I used to call, so I've turned it into an acronym, WRITE, right?
Cool.
But the first is really, I used to call it create sacred space. It's really about acknowledging that, like, this is a sacred time when you're writing. And so it's like the sacred space outside, you know, in your office, or maybe you go outside. That's what I love to do. And the sacred internal space in your mind, you know. So how do we do that? And sometimes, you know, we might go for a walk before writing, or we might say a little prayer or light a candle. It can be really simple, but it's powerful. So that's the first, is really that sacred space. And the second is read your intention and goals. So you could read your vision statement, and then you may also add to that for the day. And my goal is to write the end of chapter 2. So, you know, you could have both the big picture vision and then the end goal. But I love reading the vision each time you work on the book, or even before you go to bed at night, because it really reinforces what you're creating. And then also you might get new clarity, and the vision statement may change a little. Yeah. The third step, so you've got wipe your mind clear, read your intention and goals, and or your vision and goals. And the next one, I, is invite your muse. So that's just, you know, consciously connecting with your creative source. And it's not about doing something, it's about a state of being, right? It's about being in that receptive state. And so you don't have to do a lot. Like, you could really make these 3 steps or 2 steps, but it's sort of the elements that you would want to have. So the 4th step is tune in and write. So then, you know, by the time you've opened yourself to the muse, you should be able to just let it flow. And but there's that tune in, right? And maybe today's the day to just like be and let things move in your mind. And but, you know, usually you'll be writing. And enjoy the gratitude.
Oh, I love that. That's so special. Thank you for sharing that.
Thanks.
I love it. You know, it's so funny. You know, this is my first time meeting you, and you've done so much. I mean, you're just sort of like, whoa, it's Lisa Tenner, right? Like, it's awesome. Like, you really, it's just beautiful, everything you do. And you bring in this energy of like joy and sacred space, and just talking to you, I can see why you're so successful at it, because I feel better. And I'm sure that you give your clients, like, yeah, that's right. Writing doesn't have to feel so torturous.
Yeah, you know, one of my favorite things to do with clients is I do a guided visualization exercise that I call Meet Your Muse. And so we'll come like with some questions, and maybe we've tried to answer some of them, and we think we might have some answers about traditional publishing or self-publishing, or is this a memoir, is it a self-help book, kind of. But then we'll go to the muse and ask, and it's like go into the meadow and the woods, and then and then we ask the muse. And I love that, because it is often a joyful process, and it's a process that is so expansive. Like, it's such a different way, I think, of being in the world than we normally are in our everyday, generally.
Totally.
And so it really acknowledges the sacredness of the whole act of creating anything.
Totally.
And puts us in touch with that deeper knowing. So that's part of the joy too, I think, is just being able to really connect with that in a deep way. And then, ask, we may have our list of questions, but then as we're feeling into it, and in that moment, I might ask some other questions that become clear to me.
Yes.
Yeah,
I love it. Tell us, that also taps into what you said earlier about trust, right? You call on the muse, when you have the vision, there's a sense of, you just got to trust the process. And you're creating, you're creating, and you don't know everything going in,
Yeah. Right. And with writing, like when we write from that place of not knowing, we find deeper truths, like we find amazing metaphors. But if we write, I sometimes call it my blog voice. Hopefully my blog doesn't always sound this way, but I think sometimes, there's this like, oh, here are the 5 things you need to know about X. And, we've got to create some space for that, super creativity.
Something you don't even know. Yeah, like the voice. I mean, think about all the bizarro, awesome books out there. There's so much true creativity, and that's the whole write from your heart, right? When we're writing from our head, the blog voice.
Yes, right.
That's what the head space. What do they want? How do I give it to them? Let's make everybody happy. But then the heart, it's sort of, I always like to think of it as kind of like the dog that's all of a sudden the leash is going, and you don't know which way you're going. They found something, and that's, you're out of control for a second, and that's a good thing. You let the heart lead. So what about information about how to get published the traditional way today? Like, I have a lot of people are always still curious about it. There's a lot of great work out there with self-publishing, but what's going on from the person who knows the most?
So, I think traditional publishing is not for everyone. Like, if you're in a real hurry to get the book out, or you don't have a platform and don't really want to work on building it, often it's, self-publishing is going to be a better path. If you want total control. So it's not for everyone, but I think there are times, particularly with prescriptive books, sometimes, there's that extra cachet, or it will be in bookstores. And so, you have potential maybe to reach more readers quickly in those first few months. And publishers, and you get this wonderful team that's worked together before and has a lot of industry knowledge. So, there are definitely some advantages as well. And so then, it comes down to, I like to go back to that vision, right? That intention statement of, well, what is your vision? Because if it's to grow a business, let's say you're a hairdresser and you just, want to grow your hairdressing business, you don't need to sell thousands of books for it to be successful, right? Or if you're a consultant or an astrologer, like any of those things, you really just need to reach the right people and have them see, oh, right, yes, you are the person they want to work with. So go back to that vision and goals and see if what really makes sense and fits with that vision. But let's say you do that and you say, or something in your muse is saying, traditionally published. So then the first thing that publishers want to see generally, especially prescriptive books, is platform. They want to see that you're already reaching a lot of people in the target market for this book. And usually they like to see a variety, like you have a good website and people are coming to it, and you have a good sized mailing list. Size really varies depending on the particular type of book. So, it's hard to give a number. For some books, 10,000 people would be great. And for other books, like 100,000 is not enough. So
Yeah,
it
yeah.
really varies, and other, different publishers too, but depends on the genre as much. Um, so, they like to see that you're doing some social media. They like to see that you get in front of people live, because that's a really wonderful way to sell books.
Mm-hmm.
Podcasts, you don't have to be a podcaster, but just if you're on podcasts,
Mm-hmm.
because those are niche audiences, they
Mm-hmm.
tend to also result in book sales. So, there's not like a one answer, right? But uh, are you doing a few things that reach people in different ways that together can create a certain synergy?
Yes.
So generally, yeah. So I would say, maybe you have like three things. It's your Twitter and your mailing list and the classes you're teaching, the webinars you're teaching.
Yeah, yeah.
So, so platform definitely is one. And then fresh, right? A book that just sounds like everything else that's out there, even if you have a good sized platform, it's going to be hard to sell.
Yeah.
So fresh could be that you just have these wonderful stories and wonderful ways of telling them, and making the material come alive for the reader.
Mm.
So that could be fresh in itself. Or it could be new research. It could be that you've got a new perspective that other books don't have. Or it could be that, the other books out there are all like 500 pages and this one is super short and humorous. So, so fresh, is important. And then market, that there is a good size market for this book and that there is a clear way to reach that market, also is really important to publishers. So I would say those are probably the trifecta of
Yeah. Yeah,
what
yeah.
what publishers most want.
Can
Uh,
people still get published without a platform?
so that's a great question. I would say with a prescriptive book, almost never. It's possible if there was, let's say, a publisher that already reached a lot of people in your market. They might and so they like had a great mailing list of that specific market.
Mm.
Um, so a smaller publisher, we're now talking a very niche publisher.
Mm.
Then it's possible, but even there, they usually want to see that at least you're on social media and reaching some people. You have some mailing lists, because those are the people who are going to buy first and spread the word. So
Yes.
they really want to see there's some traction there, some momentum that you can gain. With memoir, I mean, it's most easy to publish a memoir if you're a celebrity.
Yes, of course.
But then, there are these breakout memoirs. But even if you look at some of the breakout memoirs, those writers already had an
Yes.
audience, right? They were already reaching people, whether through magazine articles,
Mhm.
as Elizabeth Gilbert was, or I think of Dear Sugar.
Mhm. Yeah, yeah.
She was already reaching a lot of people before writing her memoir. It and then Wild, right?
Yeah, yeah. Wow. No, it's okay. I know. It's so hard to remember all of them. Cheryl Strayed.
Um,
Cheryl Strayed.
but so all those things, platform helps. Could you possibly get a publisher with an extraordinary book that's a memoir? I think it's possible, but you're definitely like running uphill. It's not, or maybe you even got to put on like some mountain climbing gear.
Yeah.
and publishers, because they see you, the author, as their marketing partner, and that you're going to be selling books. You're not just sitting there writing, but you're going to be reaching people. And sometimes people are scared of that. But I've had clients who, and this was maybe more in the self-publishing realm, because they didn't have to develop the platform and they wrote the book, and then they were like, okay, now I've got to sell it. And they were scared of that part, and then did really well because they found a way to just reach people that really worked for them. And I think of Pat Hastings, who was not a marketing person. She wasn't even a writer when she came to me. She had like done really badly in C's in English or something, and some nun told her she couldn't couldn't write. So the first was like learning the rules of writing, and she wrote a wonderful book. Her first book was Simply a Woman of Faith. And then when it came to marketing, she realized, oh, this is just all about meeting people and being of service to them. Like,
Yes.
I can do this. This is like, she was before she became an author, she was a substance abuse counselor,
Oh, wow.
VA hospital system. And so she, could counsel people, she could teach them, she could coach them, right? And so she realized, oh, this is just a way for me now to really connect with my people. So it scared her, but then it was really natural for her. So I think the trick is finding what's natural for you and not forcing yourself to do something that is painful and that you're not good at. So sometimes there is a period of like mastering something that feels uncomfortable, and then it's like, wow. But I think there's that discernment, like, is this something for me to learn that is an authentic way for me to sell these books, or is there something else that's maybe more authentic? So
I love that. Wow. I've, just sparked another question, and I could be making this up. So I'm just going to ask. It's kind of funny. I think I've heard, like, there's a couple of books out there that they self-published first. They sold like 5,000 to 8,000 copies, and then they were picked up by publisher.
That definitely happens. And the number will depend again on like genre and publisher. The sort of the magic number you hear in the industry is 15,000, but it certainly can sell for like 5 or 8. So it just depends on genre. But like if you're going to say the magic number, we say 15, but it varies. Yeah, and I did work with somebody, Kimber Simpkins, who had self-published her book full, and she had actually sent a query letter to New Harbinger, and it got rejected, probably by like an intern or something, right? Because they've got this huge pile of stuff that just comes in from people individually. She didn't have a big enough platform to get an agent. So a month after it's published, she had already entered it into the Nautilus competition. She hadn't won yet because it takes time to hear, but she won with the self-published version when she did eventually win. But the editor, I think maybe even the same editor that she had originally sent the letter to, who probably never saw it, said, we want to publish this book. And they had some great suggestions, like they wanted to change it a little bit. But that's a good example of a publisher that's already reaching that audience.
Wow.
So, and they did see, she was doing some good marketing with the book. It wasn't like she was sitting back and hoping for it to sell. But that was in a month. So it was more based on the book and the writing, and that they saw a real market for it than, and I think the editor just fell in love with the book when she read it. So,
a great story. Yeah.
Yeah. And I think I have, it's such a beautiful cover.
Oh, I want to see.
So this is the cover that New Harbinger designed.
Oh, wow. That's beautiful.
Yeah.
What's the subtitle? How I Learned to Satisfy My Insatiable
Hunger and Feed My Soul.
Oh, that's a gorgeous book.
Isn't that beautiful?
Yes. Wow, that's beautiful. Congratulations on that. You've got some great books. By the way, everybody out there, Lisa publishes amazing books. I've watched some of your interviews, and I just love to start writing things down, like The Creativity Cure. I forget what the other one was. I have a little list somewhere. And it's just such a godsend to know that there's someone out you helping people and guiding them. Writers, definitely, we all need help from you. Another question was, let's just briefly touch upon fiction, because do you need a platform for fiction?
So that's a great question. Not so much. I mean, I think, again, it varies. And if you're somebody who is already speaking at library conferences, or, you networked in that field or area, it's going to help, right? So anything that you have in the way of platform definitely helps. Or if you're a blogger, maybe you're a book blogger and you do reviews of children's books or other fiction. So, anything you do is going to be really helpful. But certainly, publishers are always looking for the next great work of fiction. So it's not as crucial.
Awesome. Yeah, I have some people I find, some people, it's easier to access their story that's in them. And then they go, wait a second, I'm miswriting fiction. And that's actually their love. Did you ever experience someone who starts out in one genre? I think this is kind of common, maybe not. And then goes, oh my gosh, I can't stand writing that. And then they finally write what they want, like what I say, from the heart. So they're writing from the head first, and it's choppy, it's work, it doesn't feel right. And they say, fuck it, excuse the language. And they go, and they say, I'm gonna write what I wanna write. And then they actually flourish. Do you see people shift gears like that?
I do. And I have to say myself, sometimes I'll be writing, I'm like, it's the blog voice. I can't access, and then, other days it'll be like, oh, reread. I like to reread the good stuff and just
Yes.
like bask in it, because the other stuff, it just makes you cringe. Like, and you think, oh, I can't write anymore. I'll never be able to write again, because it comes out crappy because you're in your head. And
Oh,
so, it's just like being gentle with yourself. And but yeah, and sometimes it is not just realizing uh that I was writing from my head, but you know what, this isn't the right book. And that's
yeah.
happened to me and to some of my clients.
I just adore that. I'm going to hear that from now on, the blog voice. I never knew what to make it. I was like, where's that coming from? Why am I getting so linear and rigid about what I do? Like, that's no fun.
And I mean, hopefully in our blogs, I think the things that, even when you're being prescriptive, like 5 things to know, or I think when we, like, sometimes in the list you use alliteration, or you're playful about it, or use humor, or use words you love, or describe something in nature.
Mhm.
Um, you can kind of infuse it with some of that heart too, because ideally a blog also has heart.
Mhm.
But yeah, I do call it the blog voice, because some of my blogs.
I also try to, my last writing series was Write Your True Story. And it
Hmm.
was all about how your story can, I forget the tag, was basically attract clients and get a bigger audience by really getting into the story. I find, just as a side note, because I just want to chat with you about it real quick, is when the blog voice comes in, sometimes I go, okay, how can I relate this in a very intimate, way to me, like something that happened to me that it's a universal truth, but I can get in there with some truth, like real truth, like, like my
Hmm.
pipe broke in my bathroom. Like if I start in on that and then I somehow go, I don't know how I'd relate that right now, but sometimes you can relate that to like letting go, taking a break, walking away, and then, letting, like I sat down to write, which is true. Actually, I was just like so frazzled. I just was like, I think I'm going to write, like just to get my mind off of my worry head.
Uh-huh.
And I was able to, that big experience of panic and there was no water for the whole day, and I just had to like surrender, actually gave me some space to just do something that I loved, which was to write. So I'm not saying that we need to write our true stories all the time in the blogs, because that can get monotonous too. But yeah, I love that you say, go to nature, go to your truth, however you can get into the heart space, I think really connects. It really
Yes. Yeah. And I think too, like, we're not going to connect with our reader unless we're connected to ourselves.
totally. Okay, one more question, because I just thought of this too. What about poetry these days? I've been threatening to do a writing series on poetry. It seems that I even had some people who I was interviewing, and they said, the first thing I wrote was poetry. And it started to be like a thing, but we're like a little bit afraid of poetry, even though we use it in business, at funerals, in
Mhm.
weddings. I mean, poetry is not going away. Do people still write books of poetry?
They do. They do. It's interesting because I actually took the University of Rhode Island has a writing conference, and a few years ago I took a poetry workshop, and the instructor gave us some really great exercises. So it was really fun. I felt like, I mean, some stuff I wrote in there wasn't crazy about, but I wrote a few things that were really playful, and it was fun to experiment. But on the other hand, he came to it as a critic. So when I had my private session with him, and I brought like these poems, and I hadn't had poetry critiqued in years. I started out as a poet when I was a little kid,
Yeah.
and I took some poetry classes in college, and then again after graduating, the Cambridge Center for Adult Ed in Massachusetts had a great program, and I studied with Harold Bunn. He was wonderful. But at MIT, I studied actually with Jean Valentine and Gertrude Schnackenberg, who were publishing, and so, like, with real luminaries. But I think because, like, there's a way as a society we don't value the poetic
Mm-hmm.
in some ways. I found that I had actually, like, discounted that voice. People would sometimes come to me with poetry and say, "Oh, do you have somebody to recommend for poetry?" And I didn't. But there was a part of me like judging them, like, "Oh, that's so, like, who's
Yeah.
gonna buy poetry?" And like, that's so uncommercial. And I caught myself doing that. I thought, "Oh my goodness, what's wrong with me? Poetry is, you know, I mean, think Rumi. It's like some of the most
Yeah.
uh, the most,
I mean, it goes right to the soul.
eternal.
Yeah.
Yeah, it
Oh,
goes
it's
right to the
totally
heart and the soul.
totally eternal.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so, I mean, it was so neat to see Ruby, what is her last name? She has some New York Times bestsellers that are poetry.
Oh, I forget her
And
name.
right, and they're Ruby Kaur, I think. But her work is very, very accessible. And so when I had this private meeting with this critic, he said, well, poetry is a, a conversation, and you have to be part of this conversation. You have to like live in it for a long time. Basically it was that academic perspective of
Totally.
you have to play by our rules, and and I think there's a place for that, and there are people who love that. But there's also a place for this poetry that comes from just a deep place, and
Totally.
yes, rework your poems and make them as polished as you can, but not from this place of what the authorities say,
Right. Exactly.
trust your
Exactly.
inner authority. So I think we have to be careful about people who are experts in the field of poetry and any kind of writing.
Agreed.
The real expert is you in terms of like, does it resonate and is it authentic? um, but then it is good to get professional help and polish, but make sure it's somebody who really values what you're doing, and isn't coming from this sort of hierarchical place. I
Yes,
think that's
agreed. Oh no, I agree with you more than you know. I'm all for, even though I grew up in New York and went to NYU, I'm actually, when I got out west, I went to a grad school in Spokane. It's amazing. It's different. It literally is different out west in the sense that people out here aren't so concerned with the canon, if you will.
yeah.
They're not so concerned with, all the pieces of paper on the wall. That's very, that's an academic way of thinking. They care, but they're way more interested in the raw creation. Let's see what comes out. I usually say people don't like poetry because poetry doesn't like most people, in the sense that if you're writing for the authority, you're not writing for yourself and to the connection of the other. But I have a feeling poetry's coming back.
I think so.
I'm on a mission for that one.
Oh,
Yeah.
that's great. I am glad to hear it because poetry was my first love.
Yeah, and most people
And,
actually. Yeah, kids always write poetry, and people, I call them closet poets. Whenever I work with people, they literally do things like, I write poetry, and I'm like, I know, we all could do that, but we don't think about it that way.
and we're kind of embarrassed as professionals sometimes, like, well, I know I'll never publish it. I know, I won't show it to anybody. There's a real, almost like a scarlet A about it or something.
Yeah. Just to inspire you and others. So I once wrote a poem, won the Wordstock competition, and I got to read it in front of 1,500 literary people, like really kind of freaky out. And so I was like, it was a 485 word poem, I'll never forget it. And I memorized it because I was determined to give them an experience of poetry, right? And then I don't remember it. I mean, like literally, I was so nervous. I did it. But then a couple of people in the front row, including Chuck Barris, I'll never forget this, came over to me crying. And it didn't occur to me until that moment, and this is going back 12 years, that's really actually what sparked my whole revolution of helping people write, is it never occurred to me that this language had power, and that I had created an experience for someone that wasn't going to have that experience otherwise. And I thought, how do we discount this work? And truly, literary people do sometimes, because we feel like. So anyway, I just want to say it's coming. I'm on that revolution.
That's so great. And now I'll know when people come to me for poetry, I know somebody who's going to take care, and nurture the poet in them. So I'm glad to know it, because that poet really needs nurturing.
Yeah, totally. Well, we're out of time, but you were so awesome. It was so great to meet you, to learn about you, to tell the whole audience about you, because you're fabulous. And I think you have a great free gift too.
I do. It's called the Inspired Authors Support Kit, and it comes with a 7-day e-course with email lessons and a guided visualization, Meet Your Muse. So you get to do that exercise. and Writing in the Zone, which is another audio, and
Cool.
and then like a kind of a more of a template for creating your vision statement. So it might be a starting place, and then you can play with that and go further. So it comes with a lot of wonderful goodies, and
Fun.
just go to lisatenner.com. It's right on the homepage.
Excellent. Excellent. Well, thank you so much, Lisa. It was great to meet you, and I hope you have a wonderful day and keep on rocking. You're doing awesome stuff out there.
Thank you. You too. And thank you for standing for poets everywhere.
Oh, I love it. Thanks. Well, you have a great day.
You too. Bye-bye.